Yes, guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the first edition of the Transfer Show. Yeah, I'm working on the name. It's a little bit basic, that's all. Try and come up with something a little bit better. But yeah, throughout the window, guys, every Friday, myself and George, along with other guests, will be bringing you a roundup of all the latest transfer news and goings on to do with the Mighty Blues. And obviously, the transfer window officially opened today. No signings of yet from Chelsea, but with reportedly up to £200 million budget, potentially more with any outgoings. It's certainly going to be a busy summer at the Bridge. George, great to have you on board, mate. Transfer Show, first one of the series. Working on the name, so yeah. If anyone's got any suggestions in the chat for a slightly better name than the Transfer Show, then we can work with that, mate. Window's finally open. You excited? Looking forward to it?
Yeah, we do need to come up with we need a bit more of a marketing strategy and probably more to end the meeting than just ending up with a transfer show on a brainstorm. But hey, it says what it does on the tin. And yes, Charlie, in answer to your question, I'm very excited. Transfer window, especially in the summer where there's no international competitions going on. Obviously, the first day of the World Cup would have started today as well, ironically. So, no football for a while. So it's the thing that keeps us going there. Probably not as exciting as they once were. But I think last summer was a great window in terms of just big names moving around. But I am very excited. I'm just glad we spoke about it earlier about the transfer ban and everything else, all the punishments and the sanctions finally uplifted, so Chelsea can get on with business as normal. They're estimating, as you said at the top of the show, £200 million. That's more than a kind of wealthy chest to go with, and I'm excited because I think we're going to have to be strategic in this window. I really do. I don't think it's a case of just bringing in 1-2 big star signings. I think it's going to be a bit of a upheaval to replenish the squad and rebuild.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. I mean, before we get into the signings, potential rumours, etc., how important is it? I mean, I tweeted this out earlier, but how important is it that we actually act fast and smart in this window and make sure that we get all of or the majority of the signings done before pre-season starts, so they can get a proper pre-season with the squad to bed in, so they can kind of hit the ground running a little bit more rather than kind of having a disjointed pre-season, joining halfway through. I mean, how important is that to you? Because for me, over the years, we haven't been ones to get early business done, and we tend to have players joining partway through pre-season, and it is disrupted to the start of the season. So how important is it that that changes as well?
It's really important, but we say it every year and it never transpires to be that way, does it? And, logically, you would think, yes, get all your signings in pre-season so the manager can have a good look at what's going out, possibly from people that have come back from loans, and also your new signings, get them hit the ground running. But it never works out that way, does it? And unfortunately, that's not how the window works. There are a lot of things behind closed doors where it's not always possible to get those players in. Circumstances change, maybe the budget changes, or there's an injury that happens in pre-season, so you need to look in other areas. It may be the case that Thomas Tuchel actually likes some of the players that come back from loan and decides, actually, I don't need as many players as perhaps I did on my list. And things do happen over the course of the pre-season that determine the pathway you go down. So yes, logically you want your signings in as early as possible, but we all know that that's not going to happen.
Yeah, so I just noticed, slightly off topic, I'm loving how we've both hidden the 3 logo from view, those snakes. To make sure that's not in shot. But I mean, mate, let's get to it straight away. I mean, outgoings, we already had a 3. Obviously, Antonio Rudiger's moved on to Real Madrid. And today it was confirmed by the club what we all knew. Andreas Christensen has officially left Chelsea, along with Danny Drinkwater as well, which I know you're absolutely devastated about. What's it like? I mean, obviously, mate, official news that Christensen's gone. I've asked you before a few months back when we knew it, but now that kind of the news is official, I mean, I still think it's a bit of a shame, really, kind of how it's ended for him as well, with those kind of health issues. Are they health issues? We don't really know. We're kind of in the dark a little bit. I mean, it's a bit of a shame how that's ended, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to find out if it eventually does come out of what Christensen or one of his representatives does end up saying. Might come out in a couple of years or so what actually went on at Chelsea if he ever has an interview and sits down with someone. But I think you're right. You've hit it on the nail on the head there with it being a shame. I think we're more gutted about Rudiger going because of the first team starter he was and how much of an impact he had, particularly in the system that we play. But I mean, we've mentioned it numerous times, and so have people at the club, that Christensen was one of those players that had bags of potential. JT saying that he was one to watch. Certainly has had games in a Chelsea shirt where he's proven that, and he's been one of the best players on the pitch, no doubt.
Well, mate, he was superb in Porto, wasn't he, when he come on for Thiago Silva in that final? He was unbelievable.
Yeah, and for that, I'm forever thankful. And I think he has got bags of potential. I also loved watching him in the Euros as well. I thought he was superb for Denmark.
Yeah.
But, it's a shame. I don't really know what's happened there, because I don't really think Tuchel would have ever wanted to get rid of him. So maybe it was a personal choice of his. But he did have mistakes in his locker, and I still feel, is he a good enough centre half for a title-winning team? There's still a huge question mark. But yeah, it is a shame, but I wish him the best of luck.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. And obviously, sticking with outgoings, Cesar Azpilicueta, another one that potentially could be on the way out. A little bit of an update in regards to his situation. I'll just bring it up on the screen now. Obviously, it's all gone a bit quiet, really. There's not been an awful lot in that. But according to reports, George, Matt Law in the Daily Telegraph, very reliable, Thomas Tuchel is sweating over the future of Cesar Azpilicueta. Sources claim Azpilicueta was preparing to say farewell to Chelsea, but the change of owners and the losses of Christensen and Rudiger has complicated things. Tuchel wants Azpilicueta to stay, and more talks will be held after Sunday. So obviously when Aspi gets back from international duty with Spain. We've kind of said, what we think about Aspi and him moving on, etc. But George, this becomes a little bit more important now, doesn't it? We're losing a lot of experience. We're losing a lot of players. We're not going to be able to replace them all in this one window. It would be quite useful to keep him, wouldn't it?
I think he needs to stay now. Yeah, I know we probably knew that Rudiger and Christensen were going to go eventually, but to lose your club captain in the same, all three at once with no one coming in imminently, you can't leave yourself that short. And he's, okay, we've probably seen the best of Azpilicueta, we know that, but he's also got a lot still to offer off the pitch, in the dressing room. He's still a very good 7 out of 10 player most weeks anyway. But he's got the power play, unfortunately. Now he'll probably ask for astronomical wages. We're probably only going to offer him the 1-year deal. So again, it's probably up to him whether he wants a new challenge, whether he wants 2 years, a huge wage bill that he'll probably ask for, that are Chelsea prepared to offer. But yeah, I think Cesar Azpilicueta has the power play over Chelsea with this one.
And he's earned the right for his service over 10 years, won everything there is to win, that he's earned the right to decide whether he wants to stay or not, ultimately. I think, if players start to come in, like a couple of defenders come in, then maybe that will kind of soften the blow of him leaving. But, I mean, we need 2 centre-backs coming in, and we need cover on the left and right side in the full-back/wing-back area, depending on what system we opt to play. And if that doesn't arrive, then we've got to try and do our best to keep him. So I think maybe there's going to be more updates on this over the coming days and weeks, depending on who comes in. I think will dictate whether Aspi stays or goes. But yeah, he's earned the right to decide whether he wants to stay at the club or not. But George, we can't have a transfer show and not talk about that man, Romelu Lukaku. The update in his future. Obviously, it's emerged over the past week or so that he wants to go back to Inter Milan. It came out, I think, a report in Damartio saying that as far back as kind of December time, that Lukaku had been kind of texting former teammates at Inter Milan and the Inter Milan president that he wanted to return to the club. Let me just bring up the latest news on the Lukaku. Actually, before I bring up the latest news on that, George, thoughts on this deal as a whole? Obviously, it's clear Lukaku doesn't want to be at the club. He needs to move on. It's been a complete disaster, hasn't it? I mean, it's textbook Chelsea. We're excited for it. Thought it could make a difference. It's not worked out. I mean, to be honest, mate, I'm doubting now. I know hindsight's a great thing. I don't think he ever wanted to come back in the first place. I know he said it in his first interview when he came back, etc. But he did say beforehand that if Inter didn't have financial problems, he didn't want to leave. He only left because he kind of had to help the club to ease the financial burden. They had to cash in on kind of their main assets, which they did. But it's kind of clear now, George, he never wanted that return in the first place.
No, and he was very happy with Conte. Obviously, Conte then left. He didn't want to leave under those circumstances either. Conte was the one who kind of gave him that next opportunity and that belief, and he obviously took Serie A by storm. But he was never our first choice. I really don't believe that. I think everyone was going for Erling Haaland, then Harry Kane. I don't think either of those were ever going to come to Chelsea anyway, but he certainly wouldn't have been top of Chelsea's list, and he was the next best option for Chelsea. That is, look, if these things are true, I think he's just a first-class prick, isn't he? He's never, coming up with these outrageous interviews, never really giving it 110% on the pitch. Okay, it hasn't really come out of his mouth since that interview, so I'll watch what I say, but it seems very clear, and it has been for a long time, that he's wanted out and he wants a way out, and it could only happen to Chelsea, couldn't it? This sort of story, what's happened.
It's a colossal mistake, and no one's blame free. Everyone has to take responsibility. Lukaku himself for not delivering on the pitch. Thomas Tuchel has to take his share of responsibility as well. Yes, he wasn't his first choice, but when presented with Lukaku, he was happy to have him. He could have said, look, actually, do you know what? I don't want him. I want to work with what we've got and whatnot. So he has to kind of take some portion of the blame there, and also a bit of portion of the blame that once Lukaku arrives in the club, you've got to try and do your best to make it work with the star signing. And, I love Thomas Tuchel. We all do, but he's not immune from criticism. I'm not sure if he's done his utmost to get the best out of Romelu Lukaku. I mean, do you think that's a fair thing to say?
I do, but I think after the interview, he had to make a stance that no player is bigger than the club. And I think if he had just let him play after what he came out and said, I think it downgrades your stance as a manager. I think you have to be careful, because then players start to look over their shoulder and think, hang on, he's come out with these outrageous claims that he's unhappy, doesn't want to be at Chelsea, and yet he's still starting. And by the way, he still wasn't scoring. I know he started well, but he still wasn't scoring. Granted, no one else in the team was either, but I think Tuchel made the right call. What I do agree with is that I think there should have been a bit of pre-planning on a system for Lukaku once we knew we were signing him, and we never really played to his strengths. We just don't play the way that. But I think that's perhaps not a Tuchel or Chelsea problem. I think that's more of a modern day football problem. You don't really see these big number 9s anymore. Even Haaland. I mean, look at the incredible pace he has. It's a tough one, but I agree. I think that you can't solely blame Lukaku for this.
No, it's definitely a collective.
It's all hindsight, isn't it? I mean, if he had scored loads of goals this season and he took us to the title,
of course,
clapping and singing his praises. So you don't know. You don't know until you do it. But it just seems Chelsea have got this trend of doing it time and time again.
I mean, it has been a total disaster. Obviously, the latest kind of in the future, really, he's basically said he's felt that he's kind of being forced out. He kind of wanted to be a main player, etc. The latest in the Lukaku move is this. I'm just going to bring it up on the screen now, as it's easier to show it from the trusty Ben Jacobs. Basically, Lukaku, this was tweeted out a couple of days ago, just explaining that Lukaku's return to Inter still requires significant negotiation. Tuchel's happy for him to return, but Clear Lake Bowley won't let him leave unless the deal makes financial sense, which is fair enough. Chelsea and Inter will now hold direct talks this week. Inter can't afford to buy Lukaku outright, but the Belgian is prepared to take a significant wage cut to help any deal happen. Told he has no interest in moving to Bayern. Inter is the only club on his mind. Inter are open to offering Milan Skriniar, centre-back. Also, reportedly, PSG and Spurs are interested in him. Apparently, Inter have set kind of a €70 million price tag on him. If Chelsea were to pursue a swap deal, they prefer not to lose Lautaro Martinez, though. And then the other player being linked as a possible trade option is Alessandro Bastoni, the centre-half. Spurs and Man United are both interested. Bastoni has denied any offers have been tabled yet. He has 2 years left at Inter, who wants at least £50 million. So Lukaku wants to leave. That's clear. But there's a lot of negotiations to go, George. I mean, reportedly, Chelsea are wanting a large loan fee as well. Inter aren't going to pay the reported £20 million to have Lukaku on loan for the season. I mean, how do you see this one playing out? And secondly to that, if we can do a swap deal where we offload Lukaku to Inter and get perhaps a centre-back back in return, would that be good business? Technically, I mean, in theory, for me, I think that would make sense if we can do that, because we're offloading someone that doesn't want to be at the club, and in return, we're getting a quality player in either Bastoni or Skriniar, and we're getting something in the club that we need. I mean, if that could be agreed, it would kind of make sense, wouldn't it?
I think that's the best option. From what I've heard on Twitter, I believe that Skriniar's got more of a sway towards Tottenham. That's what I've heard from sources that I followed on Twitter. But I like Skriniar and I like Bastoni. And I think that's the best option for Chelsea. We obviously need a centre-half, 2 going out. That would then be pretty much our only recognised number 9 also leaving. I agree. There's no way that he's going to just go on a one-off fee. I think it's going to have to be paid in instalments or some way integrated with a player in exchange. So I'm not opposed to that at all. I think we need the numbers, and I think it suits both parties. Lukaku goes back to Inter, and Chelsea get a centre back in return. But I really cannot remember a time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a player of that quality and that price tag has gone to a team and within less than 12 months has gone back to the original team that you signed him from. I can't really recall that ever happening.
Mate, I don't reckon there's many instances of that taking place at all. I mean, do you know what the funniest thing is, mate? We haven't even finished paying the original 115 million euros we paid from in the first place. Mate, obviously, we're not going to pay that much money up front all in one go. We paid in installments, like a lot of large transfer fees are spread out. We haven't even finished paying for him, and he's gonna go. But I mean, yeah, it's mad. Another mad thing as well, like update, is that could only be Chelsea first day of the transfer window, and potentially Jay-Z is going to be involved in helping us get rid of Lukaku. It's understood that, according to Matt Law from the same article in the Telegraph, that Lukaku is understood to be living with an employee of Rock Nation, which is kind of Jay-Z's agency brand that he set up, does represent footballers. I think Marcus Rashford has been there in the past as well. And they have done commercial and player-based business with Todd Boehly, who's obviously part owner of the Dodgers and the LA Lakers. And Boehly's relationship with Rock Nation could be key to the future of Lukaku and the striker's hopes of a return to Inter Milan. So, yeah, I mean, day one of the transfer window, Chelsea could have Jay-Z involved in a few transfer dealings. I mean, yeah, couldn't make it up. It could only be us, couldn't it, mate? But having said that, I think, George, this is going to rumble on for a while, this Lukaku thing, isn't it? I don't think there's going to be a quick solution to this. Can you see this one kind of heading well into the window?
Oh, yeah. I think well into the window. I think we'll probably start the season before it's finished, just because we have to be very careful about letting someone go. And the bottom line is, like we all said, look, we only bought him in less than a year ago for an astronomical fee. And if we don't get the right value of what we expect back, we'll keep him. Simple as that, whether he's unhappy or not. I mean,
do you
we're not going to lose a...
Sorry, do you think it's got to the point, though, where he has to go? We have to agree this because too much has happened and it's kind of too toxic around the club and around the squad, etc., the dressing room, for him to stay. Like, imagine all this noise over the summer in the window, and he ends up staying. I think whatever happens, Chelsea are going to have to take a hit regardless. And I think he has to leave this window. I just think it wouldn't be good at all for him to still be here next season.
Not with everything that's gone on. And, it's funny because it's usually managers who, when, you get that expression, you've lost the dressing room, and once you've lost it, you can't get it back. And you don't really get that from players, but I think the fans, they were turned on him before, got it a little bit back when Lukaku started to say, which is odd because, we saw it. I mean, even in the game that we drew at home to Wolves, we saw him interacting with the crowd. He was loving it, scoring, always looked like he was, thankful, putting his arms up to the fans who were clapping and singing his name. But I just think it's now got to a point where, we need to move on. The system didn't work with him, and he's clear that he wants to go. We've got to take an enormous loss and a bit of embarrassment on our part. But, at the end of the day, we've got to move on and find someone else. Simple as that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, mate. We're gonna look. This needs to stop now with Chelsea as well. It's a new ownership. I think we will still spend big money on players, but we've got to be a lot smarter. The Lukaku signing wasn't smart. You know, yes, on paper it ticked all the boxes, but in reality, it didn't really tick that many at all. When you
I
look
just
back
want
on
to add
it,
to that though.
yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't smart, but it was. I think we can all agree, me included, that it was our only option, because if we didn't go
Oh,
into
for
the season with a
sure.
centre
Yeah, for
forward,
sure.
we were out, weren't we? We had to. People were screaming for a number. We had to make a call, and he was the next best option available.
Mate, he was the only option that we could get that was realistically
Yeah,
viable.
yeah.
And yeah, look, we're going to all have to take a massive L on this. Chelsea as a club taking a huge L, fans taking an L. Mate, I remember start of the season when we did our predictions, I honestly thought Lukaku was gonna win the Golden Boot. Like these things happen in football. Like, I remember a lot of pundits saying at the start of the season that they thought Lukaku was a phenomenal signing and he could be kind of a difference maker and take Chelsea really close. These things ultimately in football don't always work out. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna want to recoup as much money as possible. But having said that, there's a new ownership. It was Roman's money essentially that bought Lukaku. It's nothing to do with Bowley. So it's kind of like, well, do we just take the hit on this and just do whatever we can to get him out? I mean, I can't see a loan fee of 20 mil with an option to buy for 70, which recoups 90 million, which leaves us about 7 short, which you'd take. I can't see that happening. But yeah, I agree with you, mate. I think if we can engineer a swap deal, then I think that would work best. But yeah, there's certainly a long way to go there. But yeah, it's been an absolute disaster. I'm disappointed it's not worked out. It's another big money signing that hasn't worked out at Chelsea, and there's far too many of them. When you look back, I actually can't remember the last time a big money signing at Chelsea was actually decent. Like, mate, it doesn't happen often. It really doesn't.
No.
I mean, even the next couple down, the likes of Timo Werner and Havertz. I mean, jury's done on Werner. He's like, that's not worked out at all. And then Havertz as well, kind of the jury's still out. Immense talent and provided moments. But for £75 million and 2 years in, need a lot more. Need more. So, I mean, yeah, we've got to switch up how we approach things in the transfer market. But George, that brings us on to incoming. It's always the exciting stuff. We'll start at the forward line then. Obviously, Romelu Lukaku wants to move on. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. He will need to be replaced. The one we're being linked with at the moment, well, a couple, but I'll start with Gabriel Jesus, Manchester City. In the final year of his contract, is not going to be offered a new deal. And Fabrizio Romano, like kind of the go-to transfer guy, saying that Gabriel Jesus is certain to join a Premier League club this summer, will not be joining Real Madrid, as explained 2 days ago. Gabriel will leave Man City for sure, no changes. Apparently, he's had contact with Chelsea, potentially looking to explore. I know Arsenal are also interested. George, this one interests me quite a lot. I quite like Gabriel Jesus, and you hear people say, "Oh, well, why would buy Man City rejects, as it were?" He's not a Man City reject. People need to realise that Manchester City have got a phenomenal squad and unbelievable depth and top players. Not everyone's going to play. It's a World Cup year. You'll probably want to go and play more regularly. It's like saying, "Oh, we signed Fabregas, Barcelona reject." Well, that worked out all right, didn't it? This like tagging of players as rejects, like, "Oh, not good enough for Man City. How is he good enough for Chelsea?" But I think, mate, I like this Jesus thing. For me, last year of the contract, 50 million pound fee for someone at his age, his level of experience, can play through the middle, can play across the front line entirely. More operates off the right hand side, but is versatile. Mate, this ticks boxes, doesn't it?
I'm intrigued by this one. It does depend how I wake up in the morning, because sometimes I feel like, again, is he good enough to kind of take us to the next step? Questionable. But then, another day I'm like, well, to all the things you just said, he's versatile. He's been an integral part of that City title winning team. As much as people think, oh, he is a bit of a reject and just comes on. Don't forget, he's played some big moments in their trajectory to the next level. I like him. I do like him. He's obviously got the opportunity, with the relationship with Thiago Silva, which is good.
Yeah.
Which could help. I think he's a classic Arsenal type player, but I think sometimes those connections do help. it interests me, mate. It does interest me, and I think let's put it into perspective. It can't get any worse for Chelsea at the forward line,
No.
and I think it for the value that you're getting and his age, I think it's probably a punt worth taking to a certain point. I think if they ask for anything over 50, I think then it's starting to get a little bit silly. But I mean, we've just literally blown £100 million on an absolute flop, so it can't get any worse for Chelsea. And I think we both said on the show, didn't we? Let's try and do something different. Let's go for Premier League proven players, regardless of what their numbers are. He's ready to go in the Premier League. He's played at the very top level in the Premier League, so it does interest me, mate. It does.
Mate, it's one of those that we've been crying out for. Smart business, buying more from within the Premier League as well, rather than going abroad for a fancy name. Like, this ticks a lot of boxes for me. Yes, there's still a long way to go if this deal is to materialise, but I think if it came down to a choice of Arsenal or Chelsea, for me, Chelsea are more ready to win trophies than Arsenal are. He's going to play Champions League football as well. Like that for me, I think someone of his caliber is that's going to be a lot more appealing. So yeah, I mean, for me, mate, I think it ticks a lot of boxes, and it's an intriguing one for sure. Like, it's someone that I've never really thought too much about before, and then he starts getting linked with Chelsea, and things start to get a little bit more concrete, and then it kind of grabs your attention, and you just think, all right, it's not the sort of person that I would have immediately thought of, but then once it's brought to your attention, you sort of think about it. It does make a lot of sense. So,
Oh, 100%, mate. And it was the same with if you think of all the recent Chelsea so-called number nines in recent years, the best names tend to haven't done well. And then the one that really was a bit of he was a good player at the time, but he wasn't particularly the first name on the list was Diego Costa. And look how that
yeah.
happened. A fantastic finisher for Chelsea. But then, you'd say Shevchenko, Torres, all of those are higher class names with more experience. But he's one that could just go under the radar and just perform well consistently. So I agree. I think this is one to look at.
Mate, I definitely wouldn't be opposed to this one at all. But George, sticking with Manchester City and a player that you're a huge fan of, Raheem Sterling. Again, he's got 1 year left on his deal. He's done very well at Manchester City under Pep Guardiola. He's kind of dipped off a little bit, perhaps not as important to Manchester City this past season as he has been in previous seasons. Still a very good player. Again, Premier League proven. 1 year left on his contract. He'd be slightly more money than Gabriel Jesus. I mean, I'm seeing things potentially saying 60 million. I think 60 million pounds for someone with 1 year left on their contract is a lot of money to spend. I'm not sure if that represents value for money. But in terms of Sterling, mate, just a little bit of info on any potential deal there. Is this one here? Is that the one there? Yeah, Chelsea are believed to be the English club with the greatest interest in signing Raheem Sterling. An offer from Chelsea would also be attracted to him and offer the chance to return to London where he grew up. George, you're a big fan of Raheem Sterling. Do you think a 50, 60 million pound move for Sterling, if that were to materialise, is he the profile of player we need? Is he at the right stage of his career to come to Chelsea? I mean, does this make sense to you? Would you be a fan of this?
Yes, 100%. Get the deal done, Chelsea. I'm telling you now. For some reason, Pep doesn't rate him as highly as perhaps some of the other players in similar position. The reports that I've seen lately is that Sterling's more inclined to see out his year left on his contract and stay at City, which I think will probably end up happening anyway. Because he still has some sort of a play for Pep Guardiola. And I think Pep Guardiola values him enough to say you're an integral part of the squad. Maybe not the first team. I think we'll probably see more of Jack Grealish next season. But for me, mate, the same boxes, and even more so than Gabriel Jesus. Don't forget, unbelievable for Liverpool. And, in their first title, he was incredible. I mean, the numbers were a joke. He scores goals for England for fun. Okay, people say that he's not a great finisher, takes a lot of chances. He's not, but he's got something that he's got pace, which is something that Chelsea lack. He's got creativity and he can score from everywhere. He really can. I mean, we've seen some outrageous goals from him from well outside the box. We've also seen poacher goals from him. I think, I do think it ticks a lot of boxes again. I would be very inclined to go for this one over anyone else in the forward line. If you're asking me between him and Jesus, it's him all day long for me. I don't see a lot wrong with this deal. I really don't. If he wants to come to Chelsea, I think City will be reluctant to give him away to an a next door neighbour rivals in the league. But if we can get this done, Chelsea sign him.
The only reason why I don't think Jesus and Sterling will arrive. I think if it's any of them, it's either or. It's not both. For me, the reason why I'd slightly sway towards Jesus for me is one, versatility. Can play down the middle, can play off either side. Yes, Sterling scores goals. I just think he's a little bit one-dimensional. I'm not sure if he's, fluid enough to, play across that front line. Yes, he misses a lot of chances. Admittedly, he does score a lot of goals because City create a lot of chances. I'm not saying that we don't create chances, we do, but I don't think we create the chances that, that Sterling would get the same amount of goals in a Chelsea shirt as he would in a City shirt. I just don't think he's getting as many opportunities. And you can look at it and think, do we want to bring in another player whose finishing is not great to go along with the not great finishing we've got from everyone else in the forward line? It's a difficult one. Look, it's exciting potentially, but for me, I'd just give the nod to Jesus just for that versatility reason. But having said that, George, I do agree with you, mate, that unless Chelsea take the first step and make a bid, I think Sterling would be happy to see out the remaining year of his contract, and then if he wants to leave as a free agent at the end of next season, and then he'll have his pick of wherever he wants to go. So I think whatever happens next season, he'll still have clubs interested in him. Would you agree, George? Do you think it's very much, if Chelsea wants Sterling, they've got to very much make the first move?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think Pep would ideally like to keep him, go again, get another year out of him. He's certainly still a good player. He still plays a lot of minutes for City.
Yeah.
See where they are next season. He'll then be, I think, 29 next season, which changes it slightly. I think on his option, certainly going to Chelsea at that age, it's a bit risky. I mean, age is just a number these days with athletes, but see out his contract, go on a free, and it's probably more appealing for Chelsea if he's still performing at the levels that we want to perhaps approach him then. For me, Chelsea need to make the first move if we want to, and I personally just don't see Chelsea biting too many times to try and grab him.
No.
I think it might be just a case of one, possibly even two bids, and I can see City just saying no, and then that's it, really. That's why I see it. I see him in a City shirt next season, but I would, if we could get it over the line, I would like to see this happen.
And you'd prefer that to Gabriel Jesus? I mean, people in the chat saying that they agree with you on that front. If it was a choice of Sterling or Jesus, they'd probably prefer Sterling. People saying, I can understand that. I wouldn't be opposed to it as such, but I just think the versatility, and if we're not going to sign like a proper number 9 if Lukaku leaves, I think we need someone that is kind of slightly handy down the middle. And
I think Sterling, he can be though.
Yeah, but mate, who would you rather go into a game with, a big game at centre forward, Jesus or Sterling? Like, Jesus got a little bit more physical presence about him. He defends better. I think he's not afraid to get back and defend as well. I'm not saying that Sterling's lazy and doesn't work hard and get back, but it's not a well-renowned aspect of his game. But it's certainly an interesting deal. But mate, would you agree that £60 million, if that's true, that's quite a lot really for someone with 1 year left on their deal?
Yeah, and like you said in the middle of the show, I think we've got to be smart this window, because I know 200 million sounds a lot, but actually with the other areas we've got to replace, it's not something that we can be like, right, let's go 70, 80 for Sterling and pay it, and then we're left with not a lot to get the more important. I know we need a number 9 or someone in that ilk, but really we have got players in Sterling's position which we hope will push on already at the club. He's another player on that side, and I agree with the versatility aspect. Sterling is very left-sided type player, and we've already got I know we've got Timo Werner and everything. It depends what happens to the rest of those types of players, Werner, Ziyech, Hudson-Odoi, those sorts of players. But for me, there's a cap on this, and I think if 60 is the absolute limit for me.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, mate, I'd rather spend 40 or 50. If it's
40, yeah.
If it's 40 mil, like then okay, let's have a conversation. But 50, 60, I don't think so. I'd rather take Jesus for the 40 than Sterling for 60. Just think it represents probably slightly better value for money. But that's certainly one to monitor, those two for sure. And it's definitely interesting and intriguing signings and stuff that we should be doing more of in terms of signing from within the Premier League. Just because they're surplus to requirements at Manchester City does not mean they're bad players at all. It doesn't mean that they cannot improve Chelsea, because they certainly can. George, sticking with the wide areas then, before we go into outgoings on that side, Ousmane Dembele, obviously a very talented footballer. Thomas Tuchel's worked with him before at Borussia Dortmund. He's out of contract at Barcelona. Chelsea believed to be favourites for his signature if he decides to move on from the new camp. Nothing confirmed yet by any means. Is that I think for me, a player of his quality and talent on a free transfer, despite his injury record, I think it's worth a punt 100%. Would you agree on that?
I think this is the transfer top of our list at the moment. I think we've got to get this one done. I agree with the injury thing, but he's worked with Tuchel before. So much pace.
Yeah, direct as well.
Yeah, so direct, carries the ball brilliantly, gets to the bar line. Someone that we need desperately. And I think for talking about smart business, he is the one that ticks all the boxes, not just some, he ticks all of them. So for me, he's top of the list.
Yeah, 100%, mate. For me, if we got Jesus and Dembele in this summer as attacking players, I'd be very happy with that. I really would. I think that would be smart business and good business, and something that we can definitely push forward with. But I mean, we link with other attackers as well. We always are. The likes of Christopher Nkunku from the Bundesliga had a great season at RB Leipzig. A good footballer for sure. I'm a little bit skeptical now. I'm always worried about when we get linked with players from the Bundesliga because of what's happened with Timo Werner. And, just in general, Jadon Sancho as well has had a difficult first year. Kai Havertz has struggled a fair amount as well since coming. Like, it's not easy for forwards coming from the Bundesliga to the Premier League. You don't get anywhere near as much spacing behind as you do in the Bundesliga in this league. So I'm always wary. And Nkunku's a good player that, again, will cost a lot of money from RB Leipzig. And I think we can spend that money better elsewhere, like with a Jesus or potentially a Raheem Sterling. But yeah, for me, Dembele and Jesus, if they came in, I'd be chuffed with that. I'd be really delighted. Mate, in terms of outgoings, then it's believed to be true that Chelsea are willing to listen to offers for Hakim Ziyech, Timo Werner, and Christian Pulisic. George, out of the attackers on our books, obviously Lukaku probably going to move on as well. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Those are probably, if you're picking three names, those three would probably be the ones you'd be picking, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we had a great episode on this. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. The kind of where we had the categories, and we said this is probably their last chance. And I think we put Werner on the list of last chance or got to go. And as much as I like Timo Werner, out of the three, I'd probably say that we need to start listening to offers and possibly try and find him another club. I still really like Pulisic. So I don't think unless an outrageous offer comes in, I'd keep him. Ziyech, we both agree, maybe it's just our opinions, and maybe other Chelsea fans in the chats, might think differently, but we think he's probably one of the most talented players we've got on our books, and he also offers something different that other players don't have, which is that great left foot and delivery. So again, for that reason, I'm probably keeping him.
But would you, on that, sorry, mate, if it was a case of Dembele and Jesus in, Werner and Ziyech out, would you take that?
Yes. Yeah, I'd take it.
Yeah.
I only had to think for a minute because I think, they've only, Ziyech's only had a couple of years and he's been injury.
Just doesn't play him much though, does he?
I think it's what you said though earlier. I think how many players have we seen being in the Premier League, and then go somewhere else, and they've been someone who springs out to mind like Modric. Like no one talked about Modric when he was at Spurs, but he's gone to Real Madrid. Next level. That's because yes, he's a world-class player, but I think the leagues just aren't as good elsewhere. They're just not. And I think it's easier for players like Werner to look good in the Bundesliga, and then they come to the Premier League and it's a different ball game. And Ziyech's just one of those players that I just feel is a bit of a luxury player. Can probably absolute boss a game in Holland because he's got all the space and he can do all these flicks and tricks. You just can't do that at the Premier League when it's so intense, it's so physical. So again, I just think, I think if you, like you said, to answer your question, it's a yes from me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think offers will come in. And I think, again, we're going to have to take hits on these players. We're not going to get the 50 million back for Timo Werner. I doubt we get the 35 or 38 million pounds that we paid for Hakim Ziyech. We won't make a profit on Ziyech, no chance. We definitely won't make any money on Werner either. But if these guys, we need to move guys on, then we have to do it. We have to take a hit and we have to start again and we have to learn from our mistakes in the transfer market. But yeah, though for sure, those are the two that are most likely to leave for me in the attacking position. So kind of stay tuned for that, mate. Just to kind of round out then, obviously, midfield. Sorry, not midfield. We'll come to that in a sec. Defence. Jules Koundé, that has been talked about for a long time. That is expected to happen. Let me just bring it up now. There's no problem between Ben Jacobs, again, another journalist today, saying there's no problem between Jules Koundé and Chelsea. He was essentially in London to finalise things 2 weeks ago. There's still structural elements behind the deal to be done. Chelsea are confident in making the signing for 50 to 55 million pounds. And the Sevilla president coming out and saying for Koundé, it's not about money, it's about playing for a more competitive team. So they know that. He wants to move. This is just a case of formalities. George, what were your thoughts on this move? Do you like Jules Koundé? I think it's exciting. A good age, 22, 23 years of age, versatile as well. Can play at right back, which would be very helpful.
Yeah, and for all the kind of negatives that we have at Chelsea signing players at the top end of the pitch, Chelsea have been one of the best, if not the best, at signing players at the back in the last decade or so. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Aspi for £7 million. Alonso's been for Cahill, even Chilwell was a big price. He's been magnificent. Thiago Silva obviously coming in a free.
Even
the
David
list goes
Luiz,
on and on.
Even David Luiz, despite some of his problems, he's been very good for Chelsea.
Well, he came back and won the league, didn't he? Won the Champions League as well in his first spell. So, all of these players that have played at the back for Chelsea have won either league titles or Champions League. So it's not disaster. So yeah, I like him, mate. Good age, versatile. He's going to be explosive. I think he would be a really good partnership with someone who reads the game really well, like a Thiago Silva. Because he's got that pace and that ability to like mop up. So I agree, mate. I think it's just formalities with this one. It may be a bit more of a lengthy process than we probably want, but I'd expect him to be in a Chelsea shirt come pre-season.
Oh yeah, no, 100%, mate. This will be done for me in the next week or two. Hopefully, makes sense as well. And to be fair, for 50, 55 million pounds, I know that's a lot of money. Of course, it's a lot of money, but in footballing terms, it's not that much money in the market. That sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but it's not.
It's not these days.
It's not. And mate, top quality centre halves are hard to find, and they're bloody expensive as well. Like they are expensive. Yeah. And this, for me, represents really good value for money. Plus, at his age, were he to move on after 3 or 4 years, there's resale value there as well. Because he'd still be, 26, 27 in the prime of his career. We'd be able to make profit on him, for sure, providing things went well.
And and another bit to add to that in terms of smart business is you also want players that are attracted to coming to Chelsea. I know that sounds a bit basic, but sometimes it's easy to buy players. Like, for example, one that was targeted earlier was De Ligt, who's obviously went to Juventus at a really high profile.
I think.
But he's too expensive, and he's also not done that well there, and he's kind of looking for an out. And you'd rather buy players that actually want to be at a level where they are being more competitive and taking that step up rather than a sideways step. So I think this is more intriguing because he wants to play at a level that is going to make him hungry.
Yeah. No, for sure, mate. The Koundé one makes sense. I think that's a formality that will happen. Mate, you touched on it. Other centre halves, De Ligt. We have been linked with Matthias De Ligt. Is possible debate up in the air about his Juventus future. Again, he's going to be very expensive and big wages. He'd have to take a wage cut if he was to come to Chelsea. Looking at like 120 million euros for De Ligt. He's a top player, but as you say, mate, he has struggled at Juve. It's not gone as well as you might have expected it to go. By all accounts, though, the Bowley Clearlake administration do want to make what quote unquote a statement signing. The Ligt would be a statement signing. Whether it would be right, whether it would be a correct use of money, I'm not sure. But George, if we could get Juventus down in a hypothetical situation to say 80 or 90 million euros, still a lot of money, but would you be more receptive to that? That if Juve said, if you pay 80 million euros, you can have De Ligt, or is it just the price is not the only issue? It's still you're not quite sure on him.
fantastic defender, and he's got that in his locker to be one of the best. But I just feel the move to Juve so far hasn't convinced me that he's moved forwards in his career. Yes, we need to address the centre-back issue, and that's probably our priority before Lukaku, because we don't know what's happening with Lukaku yet. But it's a lot of money, isn't it? And I'm like you, mate. I'm reluctant to spend any sort of big figure money because of the Lukaku deal, unfortunately. And we've done it time and time again with, and not just Lukaku, but different players. Timo Werner coming in for a big price, Havertz. And our best defender at the moment was the smartest bit of business we've done in a long time on a free transfer.
Kepa was 70 odd million quid as well. That hasn't really worked out either. So
yeah, it's like my analogy with watches. You don't have to spend a lot of money to have a decent watch. It's the same with players. You don't have to spend, just because he's so-called the next best big thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend 80, 90 million pound a centre half to get a good centre half. It's as simple as that. And I think Koundé over De Ligt for me, for, again, like we said, for the previous reasons, hunger, value for money, smart business.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Just on a couple of other centre halves we've been linked with. Obviously, we do really need two. Depending on who goes out, etc. But I still think we need two regardless. Been linked with the likes of Presnel Kimpembe at PSG, French international. Thomas Tuchel obviously worked with him in his time at PSG, is a big fan of his. Now, obviously, I'm not going to knock the gaffer's judgment, but from my perspective, from a fan, I'm not a massive fan of his. I don't think he's that great, if I'm being perfectly honest. I don't know an awful lot about him. I've seen him play in Champions League with PSG, etc. I don't know what you've seen of him, George, but I mean, out of him or Koulibaly, who again is another one we've been linked with, Koulibaly would be probably cheaper. Yes, he's 30, 31 years of age, but he's got loads of experience at the top level. Plus, he'd add some experience to that back line, boost that age a little bit in terms of, so that it's not all young players, it's players of experience as well. Out of the two, George, what would you prefer, Kimpembe or Koulibaly? For me, mate, the Koulibaly one is another one, like the Jesus deal, that intrigues me, that one. It's one that we always get linked with over the years, almost every window. And it's Koulibaly, someone that has reportedly been on the move to the Premier League for like the last 5 or 6 years, and it's never happened. I mean, out of those two, who would you prefer?
Koulibaly for me, for the same reasons as you, but there's a reason why he hasn't joined the league. And I think that's, one, his club value him way more than he's worth. And he always, well, from what I've read, is the wages that he's requesting are just ridiculous. I mean, to be to the point where he wants to be the highest paid player at a club, which is just not going to be possible. Physical attributes definitely ticks the box. Age, he ticks the box, because you're right, mate. You need the right balance of, age and youth in a back four. I know I've been wrong about this with a particular defender who I've actually got on the back of my shirt, because I don't rate any PSG player. I'm always reluctant to sign anyone who plays for that bottle job club. I hate them. And I think they're just that, you've seen the capitulation of so many matches where they just absolutely lost the plot. They don't convince me at all. So anyone that wears a PSG shirt or decides to even play for PSG has got a serious question mark over them, with the exception of Thiago Silva, of course. But yeah, not for me, mate. Not for me. I think Koulibaly,
yeah. I mean, for me, mate, at the end of the day, if Tuchel wants Kimpembe and we get him, then obviously I'll support him like I support every player, and I'll respect, obviously back the manager's decision, because that's what you have to do. Yeah. But as a personal choice, if it was between the two, I'd much rather have Koulibaly over Kimpembe. But yeah, there's lots to progress on that front, on the defenders front. Koundé should be on his way in, but as of another one, it could be one of a number of names on a long list. So you have to stay tuned over the next days and weeks to see kind of what happens there. Just to briefly, mate, George, someone not happy with you there, mate. Kimpembe isn't a bottle job.
John, come on, John. Have you watched
John's not happy with you there, mate. You should apologise to him.
or just watch PSG in all their Champions League games, and just it tells all the story.
Out of the two, I would prefer Marquinhos. Marquinhos is better, but there's something about the PSG mentality where the going gets tough. They seem to fold in the big games, and there's been a repetitive pattern of that. Kimpembe, good player for sure, but I would rather have Koulibaly out of the two. But yeah, I mean, football's all
It's just personal opinion.
Yeah, football's a game of opinions. Well, everyone's going to disagree. But yeah, I do think Kimpembe, I wouldn't be against it. I'd be happy if he came, but I'd rather Koulibaly arrived. And George, just to round out then, the midfield. Again, some bit of the news. Apparently, Declan Rice, obviously Tuchel's still a big fan. I'm not going to bring that up on the screen. Oh, actually, I will. Two things, mate. Not Kimpembe. I don't know why I keep talking about Kimpembe now. Declan Rice. The money is not as much as people might have expected it to be. Supposedly, bidding could be looking at around maybe 75, 80 million pounds, maybe 85 million pounds. But yeah, Ben Jacobs again saying the midfield is clearly a priority for Chelsea. Chelsea admire Calvin Phillips, but there's nothing advanced. It's Declan Rice over Phillips, though. And Chelsea have also explored Amadou Haidara previously. So Haidara was obviously is a midfield player at RB Leipzig. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Man United were linked with him during Ralph Rangnick's time there. George, Calvin Phillips. I'm not sure about Calvin Phillips. He's been injured for a lot of this season. Obviously, had a good Euros. He plays in a league side that's been struggling, so it's kind of hard to tell how good he'd be in a better team. Manchester City interested in him as well, I believe, as a potential Fernandinho replacement. George, Calvin Phillips, I don't think this is really right.
I like him, and I think he'll definitely be moving on. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
He probably is too good for Leeds United. That's for sure. I think he would be a smart replacement for Fernandinho, to be honest. I think there's a fantastic player in there. I think he's got bags of potential, and I think someone under Pep's tutelage would really give him the embrace he needs. But for me, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Declan Rice is the hottest player in potentially this window that everyone's talking about. I would love Declan Rice to come to Chelsea, but again, is this going to be one that just keeps going on and on and on in the window? No one ends up doing anything, and he ends up staying or going to a rival club, and you just scratch your head and think, why didn't Chelsea just act on this? Remains to be seen. But for me, I mean, if we can get Declan Rice in that midfield, that's where I'd probably spend a lot of my budget if I was Chelsea.
Yeah, for sure, mate. We need a midfield player. Look, Calvin Phillips, obviously a good player, but for me, as for Chelsea, it's Declan Rice the priority. I do think that obviously Calvin Phillips would cost a lot of money as well. We've got that British tax, that Premier League tax, English tax as well, like Declan Rice. But I think Rice is a better player than Calvin Phillips. But ultimately, George, if those two do prove to be too expensive or a deal can't materialise, Chelsea have been linked with PSV midfielder who's had a phenomenal season, Ibrahim Sangare. A very good holding midfield player. I think he's had the most tackles and interceptions in the Eredivisie this year. He's definitely ready for a move. Should be leaving PSG. Would be a cheaper alternative. Yes, there's no Premier League experience, but again, not a big name potentially. But this is a sort of business that if someone else snaps him up and he becomes good, it's the sort of thing where you think, well, why weren't we on that? Why didn't we act on our interest or our, that sort of thing? And it's kind of not necessarily outside of the box, but it's not a big name signing. And I think it's one of those that could go under the radar and could be decent if, Declan Rice or the likes of Calvin Phillips ultimately proves kind of too expensive or just not viable. Sangare, I'm not asking you to kind of reel off his highlights or anything like that about his career or anything, but is that something that might make sense? Just something a bit outside the box, not a big name, but someone that can come in and do a job. He's a bit of a destroyer.
Possibly, but it's the absolute last case scenario for me, because I think we'll contradict ourselves ending the video if we've said that we should be smarter and go for players that have got Premier League experience and then have an absolute punt on someone who's had one big season in the biggest DOS league that's going around. For me, just doesn't make any sense to what we've been saying the whole time. Yes, maybe he'd be cheaper than Rice and Phillips, but he's not a better player. So ultimately, let's not downgrade ourselves too much. We have got money, we have got stature and status. Like you said, we want to make a status signing. Declan Rice is one of those. My only argument to that is, again, it depends on the types of players that we're looking for, we could potentially be more inclined to buy a creative midfielder than a defensive. Do we need another defensive midfielder who doesn't score goals?
We're desperate for a holding midfield player.
Are we really?
We haven't. Yeah, we are. If we're going to switch to a 4-3-3, which is a possibility, we've got no lone six. All right, Jorginho is probably the most natural defensive midfield. We need a defensive midfield player. We just do. It's as simple as that. I mean, I don't know what's going to... Conor Gallagher's not a defensive midfield player. Loftus-Cheek is not a defensive midfield player. Can do it, but he's not an out-and-out holding midfield player. You look at all the great teams. They've all got an out-and-out holding midfield player. We don't have that. And we need it.
I agree to a certain extent, but I do think Chelsea's problem isn't defensively, is it? It's not. No. I know we had a bit of a falling down. It's more where the goals coming from, and we don't have. I know you can't get a Frank Lampard, but we don't have a Frank Lampard. We don't have a midfielder.
Well, mate, we've never replaced Cesc Fabregas in my mind.
No, I agree.
We haven't. I mean, just whilst we're on that brief point there, Christian Eriksen available on a free transfer. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but he's someone that a big club for a free transfer. It's definitely worth taking a punt on. I'm not saying he's necessarily the right profile or where he'd fit at Chelsea because he doesn't really play as a 10. But if he switched to a 4-3-3, he could play as one of the number 8s in midfield. Creative Premier League experience. It's highly unlikely to happen, but it's going to be a good move for someone, that, isn't it? I mean, I wouldn't be against Chelsea doing it. I wouldn't be against Chelsea doing it. They obviously won't, I don't think. But I mean, that would be smart business, wouldn't it?
But I think for that, that is a perfect example of like risk-free signing, because if it doesn't work out, you haven't spent a lot of money, and you know from his history how much of a baller he can be in the middle of the park. So I think he's one that you could take a punt on, and no different to kind of the Saul deal we did. I know it's not a loan, but I think we need someone of that ilk in the number 10 role, just as a kind of free hit as such. I agree that we need to upgrade the defensive holding midfield area, but we have got a lot of players, Kovacic, Jorginho, Kante, who are just, no one's getting any goals there. And it's funny that we've had a whole hour on this show, but we haven't discussed a single kind of attacking kind of central midfield player. We talked about wingers and forwards, but not necessarily. So that's an interesting one. But
I think a lot of it depends on the system, mate, as well. Like if we switch to a 4-3-3, that would enable Mount to drop in as a number 8. We could play maybe Jesus out on the right as an example, Pulisic on the left maybe, and then like Havertz or something through the middle, or whatever it ends up being. And then you can have like Mount and Gallagher as 8s, or Mount and Kovacic as 8s, or you've got scope to bring in someone who's slightly more attacking minded from the centre of the pitch. But if we stick with the back 5 and have a 2-man pivot in midfield, one of those players can't be a number 10. So,
but is that what you want? Is that what you want to see, the 4-3-3? Is that what you want?
Mate, I would like to see a 4-3-3, but it depends on what personnel come in. Because if we don't get a holding midfield player, we're not going to see the 4-3-3. I would like to see it, but I personally think the way Tuchel's gone at the moment, we'll see it in some games. We might see it a bit more than we did this season just gone. But I think ultimately, the main system is still going to be the back 5. I really do think that. But again, a lot of the signings, I think, are going to depend on what system we go with. But yeah, the window's just opened today. Seems like a good point to round out. It's been a good first show, guys. Thanks for getting involved in the chat. Really enjoy your input, even if we agree or disagree. Sometimes it's
sorry, John.
It's nice. It's nice to interact with you guys live whilst we're doing this. So I appreciate all of that. If you're tuned in now, you're not subscribed, or you're not subscribed anyway, please do smash that subscribe button. We passed the 500 mark not so long ago. Really appreciate all of your support. We're well on the road to 1K now, so please do click that subscribe button, spread the word, do your thing, help the channel grow. Lots of exciting stuff to come in the close season. We hope you enjoyed the first transfer show. We'll try and think of a better name for next week. So we'll be back next week with a transfer show with hopefully a better name. In the meantime, if anyone's got any better names, leave it in the chat below, or just leave it in the comments of this video. A better name. The transfer show was it's to the point, but we can do better than that. So yeah, try and help us out with that. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoyed that one. Stay tuned. Lots of transfer news is going to be going on with Chelsea in the coming days and weeks, and we're going to keep you updated across all of that on the channel throughout the duration of the transfer window. So please make sure you stick with us. But yeah, George, enjoyed that, mate. Thanks for your time as always. Guys, as I said, smash a like on the stream, click that subscribe button, and we'll catch you in the coming days for some more Chelsea news. But until then, guys, take care and up the Chelsea.